Okay, I have 11:30, so I suppose we should get started. Questions about the test or lab or lecture? Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, great.
All right, my first question is, I forgot to ask you yesterday. The lecture quizzes.
Oh yeah, you were asking me this morning.
That would that be 2, 3, and 4? For that pertains to these chapters?
Let's see, lecture quiz 2 was on the 3rd of March, and that was probably over tissues. I don't have it in front of me, but you do, right?
Yeah.
Quiz number 3 on the 17th was on chapter 7, and we haven't had the 4th lecture quiz yet. So lecture quiz 2 and 3, yes. Is that what you asked?
Oh, we've had the lecture. I got lecture quiz 4 here.
It should. What's the date?
The 17th.
Yeah, it should have said 3. We've only had 3. That was incorrect. It should say lecture quiz 3. You've only had 3 lecture quizzes.
Oh, so it's only 2 lecture quizzes that pertains to these 3 chapters.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. That was a typo. My error.
Yeah, because me and Sadie were banging our heads, like, wait, hang on.
No. I noticed that the other day, and I didn't say anything because we haven't met. But yeah, it should say lecture quiz 3.
And this is bones, right? Yeah.
That was over chapter 7 up to section 7.3. That's what I have in my notes.
All right, so these are fair game for like review?
Well, sure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. We can talk about 5, 6, and 7. We can talk about 8. We can talk about lab stuff. Again, it's open forum. Given that we have the exam tomorrow, I was thinking you're probably focusing more on lecture stuff, but it doesn't have to just be lecture stuff.
My screen is gonna go black, but I'm with you guys. It's just that I gotta go make a run. I had to pick up my fiance.
So you're gonna be able to do audio, or you're gonna be gone until you come back?
Oh no, I'll be audio.
Okay.
I just won't be visual.
Yeah. Okay.
Until I park, and then I'll become audio. So it's gonna be like kind of weird.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Sadie, it looks like you're ready to say something.
I'm like, so I just haven't got to the last video on the chapter 7 yet, where you talk about osteoporosis. So like that's really the only thing I gotta fill out my notes real quick. So if you just want to click over that. I just haven't watched the video yet.
Okay. Okay. So you're talking about what specific section?
Chapter 7, right at the end.
Ossification, you mean?
No, osteoporosis. There was a video we were supposed to watch, and I just haven't got to that video. It was like a little link you put in the chapter 7 lecture.
Okay, let's go to that. Let's go to that.
Yeah, I don't remember osteoporosis.
Let me share my screen here and we'll see what we got here. Okay, do you see the chapter 7 skeletal system on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying in the second video?
Yeah, like right at the end, like 38 minutes in.
Okay, all right.
Because I don't know where it is in the book.
Well, let's look at it here.
Okay.
Are you seeing it? I don't know what you're seeing now. A different screen popped up.
It just shows a video loading.
Okay. Maybe I should have went to the PowerPoints itself, not the recording of the lecture. Let me back out of this and go to the PowerPoint itself. Which is going to be a long PowerPoint, so it's going to take a minute to load here.
Okay.
And the reason is because we have all the bones, the diagram for the bones, which I should probably just eliminate those from the PowerPoint because it's such a huge file. I know I said last week that it takes forever for my computer to load this, and you guys say it pulls up pretty quick. It does for me at home too. But man, when I'm sitting here, it's not even a quarter done yet. It's big. I think the previous editions of this textbook probably had a section on osteoporosis. Trying to remember, and that's why I probably put that in, because I thought it was a really important topic. Look in the back here real quick, see where it's us in the right direction. 164. 214. Okay, on page 213, clinical application 7.2 does talk about a little bit about osteopenia and osteoporosis, but it doesn't give a whole lot of information, just a little bit. Still loading. But typically we associate osteoporosis with a decline in estrogen levels, although men can have it as well as women, but it tends to impact women sometimes more so. And when that estrogen level falls, at menopause, then that results in less bone density and increased risk of fracture, which is why you often hear about people being encouraged to exercise. In the olden days, they used to walk the mall before the mall opened, I don't know if they still do that or not.
They do.
Do they? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So having some stress, right, placed on bones, we talked about that in a positive kind of way, encourages maintenance of bone density. Also, consuming enough calcium and vitamin D can assist in that process as well. Vitamin D encourages calcium absorption. All right, so we got the PowerPoint loaded here. Let me go back. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to reshare the PowerPoint. Okay, do you see that now or not? You see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see, what slide was that? So Sadie, is this the slide you're talking about?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so this isn't just on osteoporosis. As it indicates here, this is covering bone maintenance in a more broad sense, right? Homeostasis, remodeling, osteoporosis, fracture repair. So there's going to be a whole host of topics described in this video. So I guess we should watch it. Let's see if I do this. Is it pulling up on your screen or not? No, okay. I'm gonna have to unshare. I'm gonna have to reshare again. How about now? Do you see the video now? Yes. Okay.
Development and maintenance of bone.
Let's watch this.
Development and maintenance of bone.
Can you hear that okay?
To begin, we're going to look at how a bone develops. We're going to call this process endochondral ossification. If we break that word down, we're going to get endo, which means inside of, chondral means cartilage, and then ossify or osseous refers to as bone.
Okay, so this is just going to go over those two processes, endochondral and intramembranous. Again, we can watch this if you want, or we can skip ahead. What do you want to do? Because it's going to cover a variety of topics. It's 10 minutes. We have the time. Want to watch it?
I'm good on intramembranous endochondrial, but if anyone else wants to go over that, that's fine.
Anybody else want to vote? Jolene, Maivay, John?
I want to watch it.
Okay, all right.
It's just because sometimes when I go to like watch these videos for whatever reason, it doesn't come up on my computer, and I don't know if it's because our internet stinks or.
Well, most of these links should work. I mean, I try to check them to make sure they play.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe I'm doing something wrong or what, but I click on it and even like how I try to right click and I still can't get it up. Sometimes, not all the time.
Have any of you had issues playing any of these links, hyperlinks videos? No?
Then it's
Yeah,
probably just my internet because it sometimes it comes in and then it comes out.
Uh-huh.
So
Well, try
It's
different
probably
times,
what it
try different times of the day, maybe, you know, I don't know when you're looking at it.
yeah.
The high speed or a high traffic time. Okay, so let's watch this.
So can you turn on the subtitle, please?
Let's
Does it have subtitle?
see. Can you see it now?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Development and maintenance of bone. To begin, we're going to look at how a bone develops. We're going to call this process endochondral ossification. If we break that word down, we're going to get endo, which means inside of, chondral means cartilage, and then ossify or osseous refers to as bone. So in this case, we're going to have the formation of bone inside of cartilage. To begin this process, we've got to have the cartilage model forming. So we're going to get a little bone, so to speak, made out of cartilage, and it's going to look kind of like it will in the adult form, and it's going to be in the same area. That cartilage model then is going to continue to grow. It does have to take on a little bit more of an adult orientation. The cells inside called chondroblast, chondro again refers to cartilage, blast means to create. So these cells that had created the cartilage model are going to die. We're going to then create something called a primary ossification center. This is where the beginning of the bone starts to form. Arteries are going to grow into the diaphysis. Remember that the diaphysis is the shaft of the bone. Bone cells, osteocytes, need a good blood supply in order to survive. Cartilage, on the other hand, does not need a good blood supply. So if we're going to replace the cartilage with bone, we've got to make sure that some blood vessels grow into this particular area. With the introduction of a blood supply, we're going to have some cells called osteoblasts. Again, osteo refers to bone, blast refers to creation. These are going to be cells that are creating bone. They're going to enter into the diaphysis of the bone and form trabeculae. Remember that trabeculae is spongy bone. Osteoclasts now, which are cells that are going to break down bone. So osteo again refers to bone. Clast in this case means to break down or destroy. They're going to form what we call the medullary cavity, or the hollow space in the center of the diaphysis. Taking a look at the picture here, we start on the left with the development of the cartilage model. Then in the center, that model continues to grow. Once the artery and veins grow into the center of the bone, then we get that primary ossification center forming. We've got chondrocytes or chondroblasts dying. We've got osteoblasts moving into the area and starting to lay down trabeculae. And then, of course, we're going to have some osteoclasts coming in and making the medullary cavity. The next thing that we have to do is what's called secondary ossification, because primary ossification only creates bone in the diaphysis. Secondary ossification is going to create bone at the epiphysis. So it does occur at the epiphysis. And once we've got bone formed on the epiphysis, we then have to finish up this process by including articular cartilages and the epiphyseal plate. The articulating cartilages, we know, are going to cushion the ends of the joints and decrease friction when the bones are moving. The epiphyseal plate, however, is a piece of cartilage that remains between the diaphysis and the epiphysis. The function of the epiphyseal plate is to ensure that the bone can still grow, because of course when the fetus comes out of mom and is now a baby, we would continue to grow throughout life. So we need a place to do that, because bone, being a solid tissue, otherwise wouldn't be able to grow. So the function then of articulating cartilages is to cushion the joint, and the epiphyseal plate's function is to allow the bone to continue growing. If you look at this picture, similar events are going to happen in secondary ossification. We're going to have to begin by having an artery and a vein grow into the center of the epiphysis. We're going to then have chondroblasts dying. We're going to have osteocytes invading that tissue and laying down bone. The difference here is that the trabeculae of the secondary ossification stays in place, and that gives us the spongy bone of the adult tissue. We then overlay that with the articulating cartilages, and on the right you can see the epiphyseal plate is a band of hyaline cartilage that's going to remain so that we can continue to grow from this particular area. Bone also has the ability to undergo remodeling. This is going to happen with some cells called osteoclasts, and if you remember from just a minute ago, osteo means bone and clast means to destroy. So these are going to break down the hydroxyapatite, or the inorganic portion of the bone. The hydroxyapatite is actually a calcium phosphate crystal, and so when that gets broken down, the calcium and the phosphate have the ability to enter into the bloodstream. Osteoblasts then are cells that make bone. So these guys are going to create bone matrix, or basically the material that surrounds the osteocytes. The deposition and the breakdown of bone are dependent on stress. So let's say that you decide to go to the gym and start working out, lifting weights. You're going to put more stress on your bone, and as a result, your bone will actually get thicker or bigger in the area where the stress is applied. If you should be unfortunate enough, let's say, to break a bone and stop using that bone, you decrease the amount of stress on the bone, you would then have the bone reabsorbed or broken down more so than created. So if you increase the stress, you increase bone deposition. As you decrease the stress, you increase the breakdown of that same bone. This picture just shows you where we would have some increased stress. If you look off to the left, the first bone has more stress on the inside of the bone than it does on the outside. And as a result, this bone is going to remodel itself. It's going to add new bone to the side that has more stress on it, and it's going to remove bone from the side that has less stress. Ultimately, the stress that's being put on the bone will be equalized to either side. We're now going to look at some bone homeostasis, and just a little side note that this is something that would occur as a result of endocrine organs. Let's say our stimulus is a drop in blood calcium levels. A gland called the parathyroid is going to release a hormone called parathyroid hormone. This causes osteoclasts to begin working. We know that osteoclasts are going to break down bone, and we're going to take the hydroxyapatite and put it back into the bloodstream. So we would have the calcium and phosphate from the hydroxyapatite getting back into the blood. So the calcium is released into the bloodstream, and as a result, we would have our blood calcium levels go back up. Let's say, however, that our stimulus for this process is an increase in blood calcium levels. We're going to have another hormone called calcitonin released. That gets released from the parafollicular cells of the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is located in the neck. Calcitonin, and this is really funny, but this is how I remember it. Calcitonin boning. So calcitonin takes calcium from the blood and puts it in the bone. So we're going to store that inside of the bone. By doing that, we would stimulate osteoblasts because, of course, it's the osteoblast that's going to make the little matrix and get that calcium back into the bone. It also inhibits osteoclast activity so that we have no further breakdown of bone. This picture here just shows you your thyroid and parathyroid glands. The thyroid is the one from the anterior view. So it kind of looks like a butterfly shape. And then on the right-hand side, if you take that same structure, the larynx, and turn it around and look at the posterior side, you can see that there's 4 little dots in yellow. Those 4 little dots are the parathyroid glands. Osteoporosis is something that we're going to just take a real quick look at. This is a condition when the parathyroid hormone outpaces calcitonin. So we're going to have more breakdown than we are deposition of bone. We're going to lose bone mass as a result, and the bones actually become brittle and very, very porous. If you take a look at this picture, the picture on the left is normal trabeculae or normal spongy bone. The picture on the right you can see is the situation with osteoporosis. Where the arrow is, you can see that there's even a little fracture of that particular part of the bone. When you have all these little fractures, it really significantly decreases the strength of the bone. And as a result, many people will end up doing things like breaking hips. Bone repair, now, on the other hand, if you've ever broken a bone, you know that the bone can, in fact, repair itself. So let's start with that. The first thing that's going to happen is that you're going to fracture or break the bone. Since we know that there's blood supplies associated with the bone is in fact going to bleed. It's going to create a hematoma, which is a blood clot. The next thing that's going to happen is we're going to create a fibrocartilaginous callus around the outside of the 2 ends of the broken bone. So we're going to get a really big bump in addition to some really cool coloring from the hematoma. The next thing that's going to happen is osteoclasts are going to invade the area and remove old, worn out, or no longer usable bone. And ultimately, the osteoblasts are going to migrate into the area, and they're going to replace that fibrocartilaginous callus with bone.
So
this is the checkers game where
that's just a very, very concise, abbreviated video that covers quite a few topics in like 10 minutes, 20 seconds. But it's nonetheless a very good one. I think they hit the major topics, the major components of bone fracture repair, the maintenance of blood calcium levels, the role of thyroid, parathyroid glands. And again, we can talk about any of this stuff, but there should be nothing really new that she presented in that 10-minute video that we did not discuss in, say, the chapter lecture. Kind of wish there was a little more stuff on osteoporosis specifically. I guess I could expand upon that in future courses.
So like when we put stress on bones, you know how like it strengthens the bones. So
Yep.
when you get like shin splints, is that like too much stress on the bones then?
I don't know what a shin splint is. I've heard the term forever, but I don't know what that means clinically.
I'm pretty sure it's like little fractures on your shin,
Uh-huh.
and they hurt very bad.
You've had them?
Yeah, I used to run track, and my junior and senior year I had them. So there's like nothing really to do for them. I just know that like everyone explained them as like tiny fractures on your shin bone. So like, is that just like too much stress on the bone then?
I don't know. See, I'd have to do some research. I don't know enough about it. Wouldn't surprise me if you're finding that running track increased the risk of that happening. And there's nothing much you can do other than let time heal it, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, I just have not researched it, so I can't really comment on it. I've heard of that term,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know much about it, to be honest.
Yes.
I wonder if there's like little micro fractures, and if that's the case, the osteoclasts need to clean up those little microscopic fragments of bone, or I just don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, interesting. They don't tell you about that, do you, when you run track or play sports?
No.
Is there any downside to it? I don't know if there is, but there's always a give and take, a risk when you play sports that, it's a good thing. I'm not saying it isn't, but there are trade-offs. Any aspect of kind of what the video talked about? Do you want to, expand upon, review more detail? Are you good, for example, with hormonal regulation of blood calcium? Figure 7.14 in the book, page 212. That's an important figure, extremely important.
Figure, what is it?
7.14, page 212. I can probably find it here on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, because I didn't take a picture of that page.
It's what do you see on your screen? Do you see the diagram? Yeah.
Yes.
So there you go. That's everything you need to know right there in one fell swoop. The location of the glands, what happens when the blood calcium levels get too high or too low. That's classic negative feedback that you've heard about, many times. Back thermoregulation, we can talk about negative feedback, talk about blood glucose level, negative feedback loops. I mean, there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of examples of negative feedback. And this is just another one. It's an important one. Is everybody good with this diagram?
No.
Can we
not
talk
really.
about it?
We sure can.
Okay.
So what we've got in the box here, in the middle, it says normal blood calcium level. When it rises, what do we want to do? What does the body want to do in an effort to maintain homeostasis? When your blood calcium levels get too high,
Once it regulates to lower it,
right? And if it gets too low,
then the opposite occurs.
exactly. So each of these mechanisms employs receptors, a control center, and effectors. Go back in chapter 1, we talked about that. So in the case of an elevation in blood calcium levels, there will be receptors in the thyroid gland, shown here in kind of a tan color, that will detect that rise in blood calcium. And what they will do is they will cause the control center, which happens to be the same gland, the thyroid gland, to release a hormone. And you see the name there, calcitonin. That's the name of the hormone produced by the thyroid in response to the receptors that detected that elevation of blood calcium. Now, this is an endocrine gland, meaning what?
It goes into like direct blood vessels. Not, it's just the one that doesn't go in the ducts.
Right. This gets dumped into the bloodstream, the general bloodstream. And that hormone gets transported all over your cardiovascular system. Goes all over the place. But only certain target tissues will respond to certain hormones. So even though this is being taken to your pinky finger and your stomach and your brain, they don't respond to calcitonin. They're not target tissues that respond to that hormone because they don't have certain receptors on their cell membrane to recognize that hormone. But it turns out that osteoblasts do respond to calcitonin. So those are the effectors. They're cells, right? What do you know about osteoblasts? Osteoblasts do what? B means?
Built bone.
Yeah, that's the term I said. Think about build. Bones are built thanks to the osteoblasts, while osteoclasts do what?
Break down.
Yeah,
Yes,
they break it down.
Break
They
down.
cut it, they cleave it, they break it down. Exactly. So the osteoblasts are going to take this excess calcium in the bloodstream and deposit it in the bone matrix, in the hydroxyapatite molecule, these small little crystals of calcium phosphate. And so if you're taking this excess calcium out of the blood and banking it in the bone, what's going to happen to the level of blood calcium?
It'll go back to normal.
It's going to go down, right? It was elevated. Now we bring it down, hopefully to some homeostatic level. So that's the upper loop here. Are we good with that? Okay. In the opposite scenario, if the blood calcium level gets too low, we need 3 players. What are the 3 players? Receptors. What else?
Control center and effectors.
Right. Those are the 3 players we need to talk about. And we talked about them earlier when it got too high. Now we're talking about blood calcium getting too low. So now we've got receptors in a different gland detecting that drop in blood calcium. As the video mentioned, these are the parathyroid glands on the posterior surface of the thyroid. So we're looking here from the posterior, from the back, front, toward the front. This is the thyroid in cream. Does anybody know what this orange thing is supposed to represent?
Is that your esophagus?
Yeah.
Yes.
What's this white structure?
Trachea?
Kurt.
How do you know it's trachea?
It's got the little rings.
Right. Get the cartilaginous ring there. Right. So these are small little parathyroid glands on the posterior surface of the thyroid. They detect the drop in blood calcium. They will stimulate other cells in the same gland. So like the thyroid, which remember is the control center, but the receptor is found in that, we have now receptors in the parathyroid, and the parathyroid is responding to those receptors. The receptors pick up the drop. The parathyroid gland says, okay, I'm now going to release parathyroid hormone into the bloodstream, another endocrine gland. And as that hormone gets circulated throughout the bloodstream, only specific effectors are going to respond. And of course, we're talking here about osteoclasts. They get activated, they break down excess bony matrix, hydroxyapatite, liberating the calcium into the bloodstream, and the level goes up. The question really is, do you want to break bone down or do you want to build it up depending upon the needs of the body? You want to maintain, again, a stable blood calcium level because calcium is so important. It's not only important in the maintenance of strong bone, but as we'll learn about later, Calcium is also extremely important in muscle contraction and in blood clotting too. So there's a multitude of functions that calcium plays physiologically, aside from maintenance of bone density. So how did that go? That make sense? Yeah, this is not hard. I mean, you got to understand the players, but it's very logical. If you just think about it logically, it makes perfect sense. But you got to learn the players. You got to learn what hormones are being produced by what gland and under what circumstances and what's the effect. So there are multiple things to know. I'm not trying to say it's not, you know, it's not easy or not hard, but it's not like rocket science. You just got to study it. So
For exam's sake, we just got to know who the players are.
if I ask you to describe the mechanisms, homeostatic mechanisms at work to help maintain proper blood calcium levels, then you would discuss what I just talked about.
Okay.
Or I could say, Nancy Smith went to the doctor complaining of certain symptoms. She was asked to go and get a blood draw, and it was discovered that her blood calcium level was too high. What will Nancy's body do to better regulate or to lower that elevated blood calcium level? So then you would talk about the top half of the diagram, for example. So that, that's one way that one could ask a question to test your knowledge of the process.
Is it like the essay question on the test?
That could be a good essay question. Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That would lend itself very nicely to an essay. Now, you could also ask a multiple choice question as well, and to see if the student understood what was going on here too. So, but I think this would certainly lend itself to an essay, as would bone fracture repair, as would endochondral or intramembranous ossification lend itself to an essay, as would the various types of burns. As would the various kinds of skin cancer. Now, these are more broad topics that one could investigate via an essay question. You could also ask multiple choice questions or matching. You can almost ask any question, but you know what I'm saying? I think as you study for these exams, you should, now in your life, be able to ask yourself, well, what would he ask? What would be a good essay question he could ask? You know? You can begin to anticipate what would be good essay questions. Now, there's no guarantee you're going to see it on the test, but it's good to kind of think about it. I guess I've heard of some instructors giving the students, 10 essays and say, okay, you're going to see 3 of those on the test. I mean, I guess that's a fair way. I mean, if the students know these are the possibilities and they develop a study, sheet for each essay question or whatever, they're learning the material. I mean, so it's not like an unethical thing to do or anything like that. Have you had tests like that where the teachers tell you this is what's on the test? You gotta know these 10 essays or these 10 topics, and yeah. Jolene, you're smiling. Why are you smiling?
I'm just kind of thinking to myself, like all this stuff, like you study and you're like, think to yourself, okay, he's probably going to ask this, and then he's definitely going to ask that, and then he doesn't at all. It's happened to me a couple of times. You're like,
Yeah. No, I understand. I'm sure I felt the same way too. It's like, how come he didn't ask that? I studied so much on that.
yeah.
He's so mean. How could he not ask that? Uh-huh. I know we've talked in the past about using those study objectives that I have available in the core shell. And while they are very general study objectives, they certainly would be worth revisiting, maybe. Right, you know what I'm talking about. Let's see, where are we? The chapter objectives, that's what I'm thinking of. Right, you see that in front of you on the screen? Chapter 5 and 6 and 7. I mean, again, they're super broad. They're super broad. And then of course we're into the joints chapter this week as well, and we actually should be starting muscular system according to the schedule. I'm just looking at the schedule here. Although that's neither of those chapters will be on the test, tomorrow. We've talked about that. But after the test, you guys should be getting into chapter 9 already. So it's like no rest for the weary. I certainly understand that it's just a grind. Every week there's something going on, a quiz, a test, a chapter or two to study. So I know it's we keep you busy. But you're going into health careers that this is kind of just the way it is. You're learning a lot of stuff now. So we have a few minutes left. Any last minute questions you'd like to ask?
I have the question on chapter 6. When you talk about the cost or the blood clot, can you go back and discuss it over?
Okay, I didn't hear what you said. Blood clot?
Yeah, like an injury occurs in the skin.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back into chapter 6. This is the section on healing of wounds, right? Okay, that's being pulled up as we speak. Just give me about 5 seconds here and we'll take a look. Okay. So this is down in slide, let's see, where is it here? Slide 69, I think, right? You all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is, of course, looking at a chunk of undamaged skin, and we can denote the various structures, the epidermis, the sebaceous glands, the follicle, the blood vessels, the fat here in the deeper dermis subcutaneous layer. Okay, so we all know kind of those basic structures. And so we've all experienced a wound. I was out trimming my raspberry bushes yesterday, and I have it fenced in, and I've got these, I think they're like 7-foot metal posts that I hammered in, right? And at the top where I hammered with the steel mallet, over time, that got to be a very sharp edge, and I brushed up against it with my arm, and oh my gosh, I had a gash here. It's not like humongous, but I bled for a while. We've all had little bumps and bruises, right? We all do. And so the reason that we bleed is because we've torn some of those blood vessels, as you see in this chunk of skin that's been removed. Now, again, this is microscopic, this is small, but it can be sizable like my cut, or even worse, if you've got a big injury like a, I don't know, a gunshot wound, or, you know, not to get gross here, but something more significant could cause a lot of hemorrhage. And so the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to bleed, right? You're going to tear those blood vessels, and some blood's going to escape, but hopefully at some point in time, it will stop leaking blood. We'll talk about how that happens in another chapter, in the blood chapter coming up in a couple more weeks. I forget what number chapter that is. I think it's chapter 14 on blood. Yeah. So the reason we stop bleeding, basically, there's several things. One thing that happens is there's what they call a blood vessel spasm. The smooth muscle in the lining of the blood vessel basically contracts. And when you take the lumen of the blood vessel and you do this to it, there's less blood going through it, less blood leaks out, blah, blah, blah. If it's a really big wound, you might form a blood clot there. Now, on my little scratch I had yesterday, I didn't have any blood clotting because it wasn't a significant scratch or wound. I had stoppage of bleeding called hemostasis, and I can still see where I cut myself. I can see where the wound is. But right now in my arm, I have got white blood cells that have moved in. You see those here in blue. Why would the white blood cells want to move into this damaged area for?
Because white blood cells try to like heal the infection, kill an infection. White blood cells.
So
Yeah.
where did the infection come from?
Bacteria from the outside.
Right. Bacteria, right? The bacteria was introduced when I cut myself. Right? Think about it. If I didn't cut myself, there wouldn't be bacteria there, right? So the introduction of bacteria occurs as a result of the wound, because there's tons of bacteria and microorganisms out there just waiting to get in if they can get in. But the skin, we know, is an effective barrier. But when we break that barrier, all bets are off, things get in. So the white cells are there to phagocytize any possible bacteria that would have been introduced into the wound. In addition, there are other cells called fibroblasts, which you might have learned about back in chapter 5 in the tissues chapter. This is one of the most abundant connective tissue cells. And what fibroblasts do is they will begin to lay down the various types of fibers we associate with connective tissue: collagenous, elastic, reticular. Those are the 3 types of fibers. So we've got to repair and build up more connective tissue here, right? Because we tore it. There's a big gash here. So the fibroblast is coming in to help assist in the repair, the production of more collagen, more loose connective tissue, more dense irregular tissue. All this has to be reconstructed in that damaged area. Now, it might take me a week or 2 before my wound is not visible to me anymore, but I can rest assured that there are white cells going there to gobble up any bacteria. There are other cells like fibroblasts going there to start repairing that wound. There might be new blood vessels forming. We call it angiogenesis, the reconnecting, the production of new blood vessels, because the blood vessels carry the nutrients to the site, right, and the waste products away. So we got regrowth of blood vessels going on here. A lot of fibroblasts making lots of connective tissue. my wound is shrinking. If there was a blood clot, that's eventually going to be sloughed off, right? More, we all scun our knees when we were kids riding bikes, right? Remember the big scabs we had on our, yeah, we all had that. I did anyway, all the time it seemed. But eventually, you know, as the wound repairs itself, the scab, you know, goes away. And we have to have cell division going on, of course, as well. And this is often stimulated by certain kinds of chemicals given off by these cells, connective tissue cells, giving off growth factors that promote the growth, the cell division.
So for the question on the slide, when the blood escape from damaged dermal blood and the white blood cell begin to
The white blood cells migrate toward that injury site to phagocytize, to eat the bacteria and kill them.
oh, okay.
Right? It's called phagocytosis. We learned about phagocytosis back in the chapter on cells. Go back and look. Phagocytosis, page 105. Phagocytosis, P-H-A-G-O, cytosis, C-Y-T-O-S-I-S. Literally means cell eating, right? Cell eating, phagocytosis. So white blood cells are eating bacteria and killing them, yeah. And then we have to regenerate the various tissues so that when all is said and done, we have eventual repair of that tissue. Now, if it's a really bad injury, we might end up with a scar there. Haven't we all had little injuries where, well, I can remember when I cut my finger back when I was like 12 years old, still have that scar there, you know? But think of how many cuts and bruises and such we've had in our lives, and we don't even remember, you know, that scun up knee that we had when we were learning to ride our two-wheeler. It's pretty amazing how resilient the body is in this repair process. Okay, I've got 12:20, so I think we need to end our session so I can get ready for my micro coming up soon. I did record this and I'll post it in the review session. Should you want to watch this again, it might take an hour by the time it downloads. It's kind of a lengthy process, but I'll get that done today. Okay. All right, you guys, Freya, you need to go to bed. You need to go to bed. We can't hear you, you're muted, but you need to go to bed. Every time I see you, your eyes are closed. You need to go to bed.
I don't have my glasses, they're coming, so I am terribly dizzy. So it's like the only thing I can do it's making me nauseous, almost throw up. So my glasses are coming in. Axel broke them.
Oh.
But I'm not exhausted, I'm not tired, I just am dizzy. So that's why I'm sitting in this darker room.
Okay.
I do have all the notes that I got since I got here, but.
Okay, I will see you guys tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye, thank you.
You bet.